range of things. In particular, she's the program manager for our content series, Key Ideas. Before joining 80,000 Hours, she got her PhD in philosophy from New York University, where she specialized in ethics and attitudes towards time. Here's Arden.
Hi everyone, my name is Arden Koehler. I am a researcher and writer at 80,000 Hours, and I'm here to talk to you about ideas for high impact careers beyond 80,000 Hours priority paths. Thank you for coming to my talk. So just for a little bit of background, 80,000 Hours is a careers advice organization, and one of our operating assumptions is something called long-termism, which means basically we try to prioritize things based on the extent to which they can be expected to have a positive impact on the long-term future of humanity. So that's sort of taking into account all future times. And you might hear a little bit about the debate of like, oh, is that the right way to think about it, or should we prioritize different career paths and global problems? So the different career paths that we highlight fall into a couple of different buckets. So we have priority paths and other paths, and then also a bunch of other career reviews and articles about brainstorming and investigating more options. So our priority paths are basically career paths that we've done like a decent amount of research into. We feel sort of confident that like this is a pretty good career path for lots of people in our audience to take. Whereas other paths are things that we haven't researched as much. We're like a bit less sure about them. Maybe we think they could be great, but we're not sure. Or like maybe we think they'd be really great for some people, but not so much for others, or like only for a small number of people. Or like they don't seem as high impact, but we think they could still be like a great option for some people. So how to use these resources? Basically, we want you to use these as an input, as a tool into your own sort of thinking about how you are going to have the best sort of high impact career for you. Okay, so I'm going to go through these relatively quickly because these are all written up on the website where you can learn more, and this link in the first slide, if you go to all our career reviews, you will find these. So first bucket is paths that are useful for helping solve lots of different sorts of global problems. So one is long-termist policy careers. This is something like helping promote election security, or helping get representation for future generations. So these are things that we think could be robustly good for the long-term future. Being a specialist on Russia, India, or another potentially powerful country. So we have a priority path on China and basically becoming a specialist on China, helping cooperation and various things like that. This is kind of the analog of that, just recognizing that there are these different countries that all are also powerful, going to have a also going to play a big role in a bunch of things like emerging technologies or emerging diseases, and yeah, that there's some fruitful paths there for people, especially if they're from those countries or know a lot about them. Being a public intellectual, so I think I mentioned that some of these paths are like good for like a small number of people, but not very many people, so this would be one of those. Super competitive, obviously, but we think can do a lot of good if you can sort of make it. Spreading ideas, we think, can be really useful, and also, of course, creating them, doing research, and talking about them. Journalism, pretty similar, sort of a similar sort of domain where you're talking about really important ideas. Again, also pretty competitive, not quite as much, but we think a great option for some people. Being a research manager or a personal assistant for someone doing really valuable work. So this is like if somebody's a really great researcher or maybe a great entrepreneur, you can sort of take things off their plate and free up more of their time, and therefore like sort of multiply their impact. And we think in general this is a good strategy for having for doing good in the world. I mean, for instance, is what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to help you all do more good with your careers, and I think that's one way that I can make a difference. So this is kind of like that. And then information security. So this might be important to lots of different issues, although maybe AI safety and biosecurity in particular. So these are sort of sensitive technologies that having sort of secure, basically having those technologies be secure from theft or tampering seems really important. Okay, another bucket would be AI safety and then global priorities research. So these are issues that we tend to think are pretty important. AI safety, for AI safety, we have priority paths on technical AI safety. So that's sort of like actually, working with algorithms and trying to figure out how AI can be safe and beneficial. And then AI policy, which is more like working with governments and figuring out how people should coordinate around AI development. So we think there are a couple of other paths here that could be really useful. So non-technical roles at leading AI labs. These are things like being a project manager on the safety team, or doing communications at an AI lab. And yeah, we think those can be really great. Also becoming an expert in AI hardware or formal verification. These are like a little bit more technical. Hardware, like either helping sort of safety focused AI labs meet their hardware needs, or advising governments perhaps on like hardware policy issues. Formal verification is basically creating programs that can be proven to have certain properties. These might be, that might be useful for AI safety or cybersecurity, which again could be useful for AI safety. And then for global priorities research. So global priorities research is basically doing research to try to figure out where should we be putting our resources in order to have the best positive impact. So in our priority path write-up for becoming a global priorities researcher, we talk a lot about philosophy and economics, but this is just to highlight that becoming a historian also seems really potentially high impact. The past is basically the only source of data that we have for thinking about how things might happen in the future. So that can be really useful. Finally, capacity building. So one of our priority paths is working in an effective altruist organization. We also think you don't need to work in an effective altruist organization to help the effective altruism community. So one sort of thing in this area we'd like to highlight especially is being a local or student group leader. We think that can be really great. Nonprofit entrepreneurship, so actually starting an organization where there was none. This is really hard, and like we think it's like worth being super cautious about, you know, what exactly you're doing and getting lots of experience first, but it can be really impactful if done right. Creating or managing a long-term philanthropic fund. So this one's like a little bit more out of left field maybe, and we have some information on the website about it. But this is basically trying to set up a fund where people can invest for ultra long periods of time, so 100 years, 500 years, and where that money can be used when it's grown a bunch to address future problems that might come up. And then exploring a potentially pressing problem area. So, you know, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about at the student summit that I'm talking about in this talk, it's like pretty early days. There's a lot still to do. And basically diving in somewhere, being like, okay, is this a really pressing global issue? Can more people work on it productively? That stuff is really useful. So that's another way to sort of grow the capacity of people, of the community of people trying to do good. Okay, so I just threw like a ton of options at you, and now I'm going to say that you should brainstorm more options when you're thinking about what you might actually pursue in your career. Why? Basically, we think lots of people don't think about as many options as they should, because they think, oh, I'm this kind of person, I can't really like do this other kind of thing over there. Maybe I'm a humanities person, I can't do something technical. But really, people are more adaptive than they think, and your career is really long. You have time to learn, to grow, and to change. And yeah, so definitely go broad. Think of more options when in doubt. And also aim high. We think, again, people sometimes underestimate how much they can change or grow or like rise to some occasion. We've seen people do it a lot. So definitely go for the stretch option. You know, have backup options too, but remember to definitely apply for the stretch things. And then the kind of core of this is, you know, try to brainstorm options that you think really could be useful for solving some of the, whatever sort of global issues you think are the most pressing. So maybe you agree with 80,000 hours, sort of prioritization of issues, which you can check out on our website. Or maybe you have your own opinions about what's most pressing, what could really most use your help. And yeah, just trying to brainstorm things that will actually help with those. But also remembering not to ignore roles that give you a lot of what we call transferable career capital. So this is things like connections or experience that you can take with you to the next role, and which you might even be able to apply to like different global issues. And this can be really, really useful, especially if you're not sure which global problems, you know, are most pressing. But it's actually useful kind of in any case. And finally, don't be married to anything. Again, keep an open mind. You know, you could start down one path, switch, and it can often be the right thing. Okay, so obviously you didn't just brainstorm these options, but pretending that you did, you have this like big list of options, like priority paths, other things that you came up with when you were brainstorming. How do you actually choose what to try for, what to like actually go for? So the first thing, just read and talk, you know, talk to your friends, talk to your professors, talk to people in the field, read about these things online. We have a bunch of resources, which I'll link to at the end. There are also other resources on the internet where you can find out about different career paths and sort of get some information from relatively, you know, not without spending too much time. And you can like sort of start narrowing down your list. Also think about your strengths and what will make you happy. So again, remembering that you will change and your career is really long and you might not be the same person in 10 years. It is important to think about, what's actually going to be satisfying for you. Because if you're doing something you really hate, I mean, you're not going to, first of all, that will really suck for you. But also, you're going to be, it's going to be hard to show up and like really give it your all. So you're not even going to like have a high impact probably if you're doing something like that. So prioritize based on impact and career capital. So this is kind of what I just said in the last slide, really thinking, does this path really address the problem that I want? Is that my best guess? And does it really give me good career capital for like my next move? Identify key uncertainties. So you might have a ranking where you're like, oh, maybe I would do this sort of technical thing, but I don't know if I have the technical skills or something like that. And then you want to sort of run experiments to sort of try to resolve these uncertainties. And that could be as minor as reading about something or talking to someone, but it could also mean doing an internship or taking a job for a couple of years. And then you find out, okay, that doesn't work for me, or actually I find out something in there that does work for me. And then you sort of do it again. Like, then you think, okay, now I have this other list of like what I want to work on. Sorry, of what might be a good option for me. And now I'm going to do some more experiments. And you kind of just think of it as this cycle, and you sort of get better and better. Finally, ask for help. Here at the Student Summit or in the effective altruism community more generally, people want you to succeed. They want you to do good in your career. We're all on the same team, so definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Also, we have more detail on all of this coming in an upcoming guide to planning your high impact career. I wish that was published right now so that I could link to it. Unfortunately, it's not, but keep an eye out for it. And this talks about all this plus like a ton more. Okay, next actions. Okay, so after that whirlwind of a talk, what are you going to do now? Basically, I want you to choose two of the following four. Option one, get a buddy. So get somebody who is also interested in doing good with their career. Talk to them, help troubleshoot their issues, talk to them about your uncertainties, and it can be really motivating and also give you a lot of insight. Even if they're not an expert, sometimes just an extra pair of eyes is really useful. Option two, read about different global problems and career paths. So here, as I promised, I linked to our career reviews and our problem profiles. These are great resources, I think, for thinking about different careers and different global issues. There's also a ton of other resources that you can look into. So maybe this sort of option can be choose one sort of substantial thing to like read that's about a career path that you're interested in or a problem that you're interested in working on. Option three, ask someone in a field that you're interested in about their work. So basically reaching out to somebody, trying to figure out what is it like to be them and how did they get there. This can be really scary. So I've linked an article by our head of advising, Michelle Hutchinson, where she talks about how to do this in a polite and constructive way. And finally, check out that upcoming career planning article. So keeping your eyes out for it, or if you really want to see it before that, you can email me at arden@80,000hours.org and I can send you a rough draft. And finally, here's me saying you can do it. Thank you so much for wanting to contribute, wanting to do good with your career. And yeah, I'm just excited that you are embarking on this project. So I'm just going to leave you with a couple of things. Remember to start small, maybe with those two next actions from our last slide. Remember to brainstorm lots of options. Don't rule things out too early. Definitely think broadly. Talk to other people, ask for help. Experiment. So, don't just think, oh, what if I can think about how, resolving your uncertainties through experiments can actually be a lot more useful than just thinking about it. Iterate and improve. Think of it as a process. You do one thing, you start over, you kind of keep moving up like this. And be patient. So it's sort of related, but your career is really long. You have time to go down one path and then another, and it's hard to make progress quickly. It's hard for everybody. You're not alone. Yeah, so just, be patient with yourself, and thank you very much. I look forward to talking in the Q&A.
Arden. And I'm sorry, audience, that there were some slight audio issues at the beginning, but hopefully we're all set now. And thanks for submitting questions. Remember, you can carry on submitting your questions. But just to kick off with the ones that we've got first, Arden, one of the questions that someone has had is, I guess a lot of these kind of paths that people might be going onto are sort of maybe not within effective altruism organizations or not where there are a lot of other effective altruists around. So how can people stay motivated by EA ideas when working in these kinds of roles?
Thanks. That's a great question. I think it can be challenging. Like, I think it's a amazing privilege to work in an organization where like lots of people around you are like also talking about like EA ideas, and that's really wonderful. But so many people, we want people to be implementing these ideas in all these other organizations, and so yeah, if the question is like how to sort of get some of that motivation that you might have gotten by like having those conversations with colleagues, if you don't have if you're not lucky enough to have those colleagues like around you all the time, I think there's a couple of ways to answer this. So the first might be there are sort of professional organizations for different kinds of fields popping up that are EA themed. So for instance, I know that in London, there is a professional organization for people in finance and a professional organization for people in law. And I think there's some more too. And people could find that on the EA London website. I think they have links for them. Mm-hmm. And then also, so London is a big city, and that might be more common here. I'm in London. Might be more common here than some other places, but hopefully those sorts of professional groups are going to be popping up there too. And that gives you some of that kind of like sense of community in your like actual workplace. But then also, I think there's a lot of community that goes on sort of outside the workplace. So I get a lot of motivation and sort of from like being involved with the Giving What We Can pledge, and with having friends that are interested in effective altruism, and with like reading the Effective Altruism Forum and sort of these like publications coming out. So like continuing to sort of imbibe the ideas, I feel like is both helps me be informed, but is also, motivating and makes me sort of like feel like I'm very much a live part of the community. So that's something you can do no matter where you work. And so hopefully that's helpful. Coming to events like these periodically and other sort of events is another way to like stay involved, and hopefully that can like also stay motivating.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And also we've had a couple of other specific questions about some of the particular paths that you mentioned. So first of all, on entrepreneurism or entrepreneurship, do you have a view on how that stacks up against other career paths as far as scale of impact is concerned?
Yeah, so I think I could say like a little bit here. I don't think it's going to be that helpful because I think it just depends so much on the particular situation. But I think entrepreneurship, so starting a nonprofit or even a for-profit, although I think we've thought more about the nonprofit entrepreneurship, can be one of the, it's sort of like a very high upside sort of path. So like if it works out, it can be really amazing because, you can start this thing that wasn't there before and get other, create jobs for other people who are then able to like slot in and like do amazing work as part of your organization. And that's like really, that could be, I think, really big and have a large impact. If that's what you mean by, if that's what maybe the person means by scale of impact, it's just kind of like how big of an impact. But of course, a couple of things to say, like one, it depends a lot on what sort of problem the organization that you're starting is helping address. So, I know this wasn't the focus of my talk. It's probably the focus. Probably people have talked about it in other contexts, but like different global issues are like, you can make a greater difference by working on different ones. And sometimes those differences are really big. So if the nonprofit is focused on like one of the most pressing issues, that's going to like obviously increase the scale of impact a lot. And also like whatever, like the way you're trying to address the issue can, be more or less effective. And so that's another way in which can be really different. And finally, just like in the for-profit sector, being an entrepreneur is risky in the sense that like a lot of things just don't work out. It's really hard to like set up an organization. So I guess I would say that like, I think the potential scale is really large, but there's like lots of ways in which it might not work out or something, which is like true for a lot of paths, but I think it might be especially true for this one.
Yeah, that sounds plausible to me. The other path that we had a specific question about was long-termist policy careers and a law background. But actually, I think I'm going to put a pin in that one because the session directly after this one is with Cullen O'Keefe, who actually is talking about that precise issue. So I think that we'll get a better answer,
nice.
A rounded answer from that one. So moving on to sort of the more general question of if people are trying to work out which one of these like other paths they should go down or which one might be right for them. Do you have a view on how should people try to evaluate the impact of other ideas for potentially high impact careers?
Yeah, so I think this is just like a really hard question, and it's like something that, you know, we're trying to do at 80,000 hours, but it's like quite difficult. So I'm not sure if the question means like evaluate the impact of these different paths or like these paths plus like other like career paths that maybe people are thinking about. So I'll just answer for both. So I think hopefully it would be like a little bit easier for the paths that we list here, just because, you know, we've thought about them a little bit. So, and like other people in the community have thought about them a little bit. I say a little bit in the article, you know, what kind of went into them. It's like, we got suggestions from sort of like advisors in the community and discussed them. So there's like a little bit of like prima facie, or like, you know, on the surface of it, there's like some promise there. And then also, for at least some of them, we're hoping to do more research, so can hopefully help answer some of the question about like how to assess it and like how good does it seem. And then, you know, we might try to do that with some other paths too. But of course, you know, as I emphasized in the talk, this is something that, you know, we need a lot of help on from our readers. And so like, how do you as readers like try to do sort of your own assessment of these career paths and others? I think there's going to be some sort of guidance for this coming out in the like article on planning a high impact career that I mentioned, sort of wishing that we had published in time for this talk, but I'll like say a little bit now.
But also this is that, so Ben, in the previous session, Ben Todd, the CEO of 80,000 Hours, talked through a bit about sort of how that process summary is going to be structured and what it's going to go through.
Awesome, great. So some of you might be a little bit familiar with it, but so there will be a section on thinking, okay, how do I think about like what kinds of career paths are actually going to be highest impact? And I think the main sort of like, maybe Ben talked about this, but want to think about like how pressing is the problem that the career path like might help you address. And, you know, sometimes it can be flexible between different paths, but if, you know, there's something really pressing in there, and like also flexibility is good because, you know, who knows what will come up in the future. So thinking about, yeah, what kind of range of problems you can address in that career path, and then thinking about just sort of how effective you think the intervention is that you are able to like implement being in that path. And that is really hard to assess, but will often, you know, you can often get a much better sense of that by talking to people in the field. Do people who are already sort of experts in this area, especially in the problem area that you want to address? Because maybe the like particular kind of career doesn't even exist yet. So like, you know, it's like hard to find other people who are like doing it, but like people who are interested in the problem area, talk about what, you know, ask them about like, you know, how promising does this seem? Does this seem like it's really going to help solve the problem? And like, to what extent? And then I think another thing to think about is how much leverage the sort of career path gives you. So all else equal, it's better to be, and so what I mean by leverage is like how many resources this sort of career path allows you to sort of bring to bear on the problem. So on, you know, one extreme might just be like, I'm gonna like do my I'm gonna do some like work like on the ground and try to make something good happen, and that like might be really amazing, but it's sort of like just your labor that you're controlling or like influencing. But if you like, for instance, you're a policy maker, if you could set a policy that would like help then like other people be more incentivized to do the kind of work that you might have done, that's a more high leverage intervention. So that's all else equal, better for it to be more high leverage. So that's one way of judging it. And yeah, I think I'm afraid there's probably more that I could say on this. But yeah, it's a really big question. I mean, it's sort of the question of like, how do we assess the like impact of careers, and basically problems, the like trying to assess the pressingness of the problem, trying to assess how promising the sort of intervention that the career is that are going to allow you to take, and yeah, how much leverage it gives you are the basic sort of components, but obviously there's a lot that goes into each of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we're very nearly up, but I think just one last question. A couple of people have mentioned things in the space of worrying about kind of misinformation and the erosion of liberal values. One person's talked about the infodemic and how we can prepare for sort of and respond to phenomena where people's beliefs on aggregate diverge from the truth. Is this the kind of thing that ATK has done any research on? And any thoughts on how we can sort of try and protect some of these liberal values?
I think the short answer, unfortunately, is no. I think we haven't done very much concentrated research on misinformation, but we do have some podcast guests. I'm sort of blanking on the names at the moment, but if you go to our blog, I know we have a couple of guests who have talked about misinformation, and so you might be able to like search for that. And so we have like a little bit there, but mostly I think we haven't really dived into it. I think it seems like a really interesting area, especially because of the importance of sort of like, I think liberal democracies seem really important, you know, pretty good for like economic growth and for sort of like scientific progress. And obviously it's like important for those to function, that there be free flowing information. And then there's probably like a million other reasons why it's important too. So yeah, I would be excited to see any like work on this, but unfortunately I don't have any to share myself.
So one of the paths that you mentioned in the talk was explore a potentially pressing problem area. And we also have a list on our website of the potentially pressing problem areas, one of which is, what do we do to safeguard liberal democracy? What do we do to sort of work on civilizational resilience? Some of these things are in a similar area. So I guess one of the things that we're saying is this seems like a great thing for, like, something in this ballpark seems like things that it would be impactful for people to look into a bit more.
Yeah, just to add to that very slightly, we also have a problem area on recommender systems at top tech firms, because some people think that recommender systems, these sort of algorithms, are like the same kind of thing that are like influencing our political discourse in a pretty big way, and that if we can figure out how to regulate that, or like not like necessarily legally, but I just mean sort of in the broad sense, deal with that technology, make it work better, and like minimize its bad effects, that might be one way of like trying to combat this problem.
Super. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Arden. And thanks everyone for watching. Before you leave the session, please give us your feedback in the poll section of the live chat. Thanks again.